So let me just show you some of the ways I have finished curly maple. This is probably the easiest way. This is just all varnish. And over time, it's yellowed quite a bit. So you might call that warming. Usually yellow tones we consider a warming tone. On white wood, though, you might say, oh, that's more than I want. So you can go with more of a non-yellowing finish, but I don't know. This I believe is Waterlox, and it's been on there for a few years. But what this is, it's almost like a storyboard. Like this is the first coat, and then this is the second coat, and then I have another third coat there. And I don't know if I added any more than that. But look how that works. You get that. You can see the curly. Can you see that like iridescence? It's not terrifically deep, but when you get that really deep reflection, that's technically what they call, class, somebody knows, chatoyance. Chatoyance is from the French word chat, meaning cat is a chat, cat, and then toy, meaning eye. Chatoyance, cat's eye, that reflective depth. Like I'm sure you've seen cat's eye stone. You get that kind of depth of reflection. Sometimes people just call the reflectivity of wood like at right angle to each other. We've talked about that, I think, where one board looks darker, and then you turn it and the other looks... That's not technically chatoyance. Chatoyance is that depth reflection, like the cat's eye. So we're getting it there. You get it with curly maple, and the reason you get it is this unusual property of curly maple that the grain grows, and it grows in almost like a little roller coaster. You have this hill and valley, and it's all coming out on the surface like that. The grain is rising and diving. So wherever you've seen a dark line from your viewpoint, the grain is rising out of the surface. So you're seeing into the end grain, it just looks dark. Then it rolls down, and now you're seeing across the fibers, and it doesn't absorb light, and so the light is bouncing and it looks lighter. So that's the reason for it. So if I show you this way and then I turned it, all of those ripples would actually have changed. That's just a clear finish. Now, here's the thing. If you want to enhance the curliness, which of course we do, it's a beautiful feature of this wood. If you've got a figured wood like this or bird's eye maple or something, you want to enhance and bring it out. So which one to use is a type of finish that absorbs deeply and goes into that roller coaster of fibers. You want it to absorb, and then it enhances and makes that figure pop more than it would otherwise. So what you don't want to use on wood like this is like a gel stain. Gel stains are very thick. They're thick for a reason. You want them to stay on the top. And a gel stain would just kill the figure here because it doesn't absorb deeply in, and it just lays flat on the surface, and it kind of erases that effect. So you can get the effect with just oil. Here's another piece I want to show you. This has just mineral oil on it, and of course you know why I would use mineral oil. This is a classic French-style rolling pin. Oh, you got a theme of French going on tonight. So we've got the chatoyance on our French-style rolling pin. Let me just show you. I'm going to wipe a little mineral oil on this. Now this is I got this years ago. I don't know if I was reading about Julia Child or whatever, that she swears by this being the superior rolling pin. Not the big straight ones with the handles that I remember growing up, my mother had. But this style is a little larger in the middle, and then it gets more slender on the outside. It's right about 1 3/4 in the middle. It goes down to 1 1/4 at each end. So it's very simple, but it's beautifully symmetrical. So when you use it, what you get is you get more pressure in the middle, so it actually is easier to flatten the dough, as I understand it. And you can kind of use one side if you want a little bit of a flatter feeling. But I guess she swore by this being the best type. So anyway, let's wipe on some mineral oil. Look at that. Just with mineral oil, we're bringing out the full depth of the chatoyance. Anyway, what I like to do with curly maple is use a nice stain to enhance and warm up the finish. I mean, warm up the color from the beginning. I don't want it cold, stark white wood. So this is an example of another treatment that you can put on curly maple. Now this one, rather than starting with an oil and just going all oil, it starts with an aniline dye, a maple, antique maple aniline dye. So it's a yellowy, slightly brownish yellowy, but it's more golden kind of yellow. And then that goes on, and then, see, this has a little story to it. I put over here the maple dye, and then I go with seal coat from there down, and then I put an umber glaze from there down, and then once the glaze is on, then the shellac. Now, why do we do that? Okay, the maple stain goes on first, and that's an aniline dye. That's a dye. It's not a pigmented powdery stain that actually puts fine powder on there that doesn't dissolve. It's a dissolved dye. So it is translucent in the way it colors the wood, just like you dye fabric. It's a true clear color on the wood surface. So you put that on as kind of your back tone. You're getting the general tone you want to see. And then it's sealed in with shellac. So the shellac now covers that up. It's not a heavy shellac coat, though. It's a wash coat. So it's only 1 pound to 1.5 pounds cut, and which just means there's 1 pound of shellac melted in 1 gallon of denatured alcohol. Okay, so 2 pound cut is 2 pounds. And typically seal coat, when you buy it, it comes as a 2 pound cut. So if you want a 1 pound, just go 1 part seal coat, 1 part denatured alcohol, and you'll have a thinner coating. So we put our 1 pound coat on there, and I have found that I like a little more than that, so I'll usually apply 2, or I'll get too much of the umber glaze, the glaze on the surface. But I like the glaze because what happens is you go from this, where you're seeing the curl, to look down here once you get the shellac back on. But as I turn it around, everything shifts a little. Anyway, they're much more pronounced. The glaze not only antiques it, but it makes those little waves, or the curl figure, some people call it tiger, and it's interchangeable really. It makes them pop and enhances that figure even nicer. So what I'm going to do is just show you a couple of the steps, not all of them, but to create this finish. All right?
Is it water-based stain, Tom?
Yeah, it's water-based aniline dye stain. So it's super easy to use. I've got some mixed up, and all it is comes in a powder, and I mix it with water, hot water. All right, so what I'm going to do is take this aniline dye, which was mixed up. I usually mix a 1/2 teaspoon of the color with 16 ounces of water. I'll first add some hot water, or warm tap. You can use distilled. I'm not going to get into all the little subtleties and nuances, but I found that you don't really have to use distilled unless you have real issues with metal in your water. But then after the hot water, I'll fill it up to the 16 ounces and get that color. Now I'm using, this is a little different. So that stain I just showed you, I've tweaked that since then. The main dye I had in here was aniline water-based, medium yellow maple. But you can get an antique maple or something like that. This is from J.E. Moser's. The code number is W1510. But it's not critical. I mean, if you can get like an antique maple or something like that, or that's a medium maple. Now, what I did was I tweaked it just a little bit. Like this, that color I showed you earlier, right here. This is that medium maple, okay? Now, what I'm using tonight, I mixed up some standard brown aniline dye as well, the same mix, 1/2 ounce to 16 ounces. And I added like 1 part of the brown to 3 parts of the maple, all right? So I just kind of added a little more brown to it. I wanted to slightly de-yellow it. So we'll see what it looks like. All right, so this is how you do it. It's really easy to use aniline dye. You don't have to stress out too much because it's water and it doesn't, you can go over it again. And I usually put 2 applications, but I'll just show you the first one. So, thing is, you want to just kind of keep moving. I think I'll start like this so you can see it. All right, so I'm just going to start wiping it on there. I got a good wet rag. Gotta get it in there. See how that's got a little browner? Can you see that? It's got like a golden brown color. I like that. Look at how it's bringing out that figure. I'm using a water-based aniline dye. So a step that I did before this was I dampened after I finished sanding, and I just sanded to 220 grit. That's what I go to pretty much. After sanding, I dampened the whole surface and raised the grain, so you end up with this like little fuzz or raised grain. All those little fibers from the sanding stand up, and then you lightly sand them off. You're not resanding, but you're just lightly sanding them off. So now one thing to remember, when you're wiping the color on, that's the true color when you get finish on it. It's not what it is after it dries. Like, it's gonna freak you out a little bit after it dries. Like here's some that's dry and it's kind of green. This is the exact same stain, okay? So it's not that. It's what it is right here. And it has a nice color. Look at that. Those are really popping there. And but anyway, the thing about the curly, like, I'll sand to 220. If it's a little rough, it does. I don't think you'll totally kill it, but if a surface has been card scraped, after the glaze step, it actually seems to pop a little. But I could have sanded this to 320, and it would still look like that, because I've done that. It's just absorbing into the end grain of those fibers. So it's more of like the orientation of the grain than how hard you sanded it, how it looks on the surface. But you can get it to pop a little more when you, if it's card scraped, it's a little rough. And when you do the the glazing step, it almost captures a little more of the glaze because it was card scraped. This is the top where we've got this nice through tenon wedged. See that oak wedge? And even this block, which is hardly ever seen, looks pretty nice. Got some little cuts there. See, if you see something you don't like, you can try to get it. I don't know, this might be dumb to do, but I'm just going to scrape this. Just want to get rid of those cuts or lighten them a little bit. It's wet, so it's not really scraping what you'd like, but it's okay. Then I'm going to just hit it with a little 220. Now, I'm going to apply, I like to apply the stain twice. Did a little bit. I don't see them. It's those little lines. That's enough. Now it won't be noticeable. Yeah, that's good. All right, much better. This is end grain, so it's going to look darker. The only time this will get seen is when the top is in the tilt up position. So now see how some is just a little lighter, like this is dried a little bit, but when you wipe it on, it's just natural not to get it totally even. It'll look pretty close. So what I like to do is get this one coat on, and then I'll let it stand until it dries, and you can lightly sand between coats if you need to, because you will have technically raised the grain a little bit again. And then I'll apply it a second time. And that second time just beautifully evens everything out, and it also gives you a little more of a rich color. It won't darken it too much. It will darken it a little bit more than this, but not much. And it'll give you a really sweet color. Not bad, huh? So here's the wedge. The grain is running this way. So whenever you drive a wedge, you want it to spread the tenon into end grain. So end grain is coming here and here. That's where you really have that strength of that material. You're not really going to give it enough force, but if you really drove it and you had a lot of potential for movement with the wedge going in, you don't want it going this way because it would split that board. It's a little confusing because the curl is running perpendicular to the grain, but the grain direction is actually this way. So I would let this dry until the whole thing looks pale and dry to the touch, and you'll feel a little fuzz. You can lightly go over it. At that point, I would just maybe hit it lightly with 320, so I'm not resanding. And then go again, just like we just did. And then let it dry, and you'll know you've gotten a good, even coat over the whole thing. It'll just look richer and better. That's why I don't mix up my stain like super dark. Like I have used it where I put it on where it was 1 teaspoon of aniline dye per 16 ounces, and it's just, you're going to get a much darker look with that. By having it a little bit more diluted and applying 2 coats, I like the control factor, and you can always go darker, but it's harder to go lighter. However, with water-based stains, you can go lighter just by getting clear water and wiping it over. It will take some off. All right, so check that out. It's kind of like, see, it's this, but it's a little more brown in it. So I thought I would try that because I've seen this finish before like that. See, this is drying already. Looks a little light right there. I'm going to resist the urge to put more finish on because I'm going to put another coat on anyway, and then I'll get evened out. All right, so let's set that aside. All right, so to get back to our treatment, from this step, we let this dry. Usually I'll let it go overnight. You want to make sure it's good and dry so that there's no dampness to the wood when you're applying the top coats. So once it's nice and dry, lightly sand that final coat. Be really careful not to cut your edges with the sandpaper. I just go hardly any touching on the edges because you can cut through the color very quickly on a very sharp edge. Usually the edges you want to break them so they're softer anyway. But once I get that, now I'm going to hit it with shellac. What I use rather than brushing is gravity feed HVLP gun, finishing gun. So I won't go into this heavily, but you have your air pressure, and it just has to, because it's shellac, it's super easy to spray. And it needs low pressure, thus the HVLP, low pressure, high volume, low pressure. The nice thing about these guns is like back in the earlier days of spray guns, everything was high volume, high pressure, and it was blowing the finish into a vapor cloud. And so percentage-wise, not as much actually landed on the project, and you had a lot of health concerns and all that. This, I've got this at 30 pounds pressure. So it's not much pressure to this gun. And when you pull a trigger, that's just the air. And then I'll pull a little further and the pin releases this fluid. So this is just gravity feeding down. I have had the kind that have pressure pots, and the pot is underneath, and it's pressurized, and it pushes the liquid up. Those work fine too, but they do tend to have more issues, problems, that clogging and stuff like that. So gravity feed gun, you can get them cheap. You can get them, even the ones you get from like Grizzly or somewhere, they work fine because you're spraying shellac. You don't need like this perfect automotive heavy-bodied lacquer finish. Okay, you're not doing that. And besides, even if you spray a lacquer or something, you're thinning it out to some degree, and then usually you're rubbing it out. But you got to get a little used to them. Anyway, I've just got my pound cut. I pull the air. Now watch. So that's just denatured alcohol coming out of there right now to clean the gun. But I would just put my shellac in there, and I just spray over and wet the entire piece. Then I lightly sand, and I actually do that twice. So I get 2 pound coats. Now I'm going to find out if that's enough right now, because I'm going to show you putting on the glazing stain. Here's a base that has 2 applications of the aniline dye, and then it's got two wash coats of shellac. Now I didn't sand all these. I have, and once the shellac is on, you want to sand it with, I'm at 320 now, so I sanded everything except the tops of these legs. That one was done. But I can just feel a little bit of roughness. You want to get that off before you go with the glaze. Otherwise, you'll get too much glaze will get captured in that. But see the finish? It's got a coating on it, but it still looks kind of dry. So a lot of that shellac, like it gets absorbed into that end grain, but the end grain ends up taking more of the glaze. So it enhances it even more. And because of the color we're using, it gives it a kind of antique finish. So let's see what happens now. All right, so I'm done with the aniline dye stain. Now we want to we've got our shellac on there, 2 coats, and it feels pretty slick because I lightly hit it with some kind of broken down 320. So that works really nice, and it starts to get a little more fabric-y. So it's even faster than you think. So now I'm going to put a glazing stain on here, and I'm going to use this one by Mohawk, which is brown. I'm sorry, it's burnt umber. And it's got a kind of red base to it, but this burnt umber is a little browner than the old Balin's they used to sell. Balin's was a subsidiary of Mohawk, and they stopped making it. So the Balin's brand used to be sold at Woodcraft, and they just stopped. So I found out that the mix is browner with the Mohawk, which I liked because I used to always add brown to the Balin's to try to, it was too reddish. By red, I mean it's almost like a reddish orange. It's too red. Now, you do see that on some guitar bodies, and that can look nice. But as a glaze, I'm trying to get like this. Let's get a little of this now. See, we've got a little more of a browner look, but there is a reddish to it. So I like to wipe it on white paper or white something to get an idea of what it is. So I used to always mix my glaze. I'd mix colorant into that redder Balin's to get this. So the great thing is you can get this, this is the Mohawk glazing stain. This is the one I use mostly now. And you don't have to change the mix. Oh, that number's a little wiped out. But just burnt umber Mohawk glazing stain. We'll put a link to it. But it's M504 14356. Now you can wipe this glaze on, but I've got this is a cheap brush. It's not meant to be pricey or anything. And I'm going to take this, see this is heavy bodied, it's kind of like heavy cream, and just putting it on there, and you're just going to get it on there fast. It doesn't really matter how perfect, you're not trying to like paint it, you're just getting a coating on there. You can get around it pretty quickly. Ugh. I'll just get up to the neck here and we'll stop on that. But this is going to bring in that antiquing quality. Now, I'm not going to take it all the way tonight. I'm not going to put a top coat like after this, which I'm not going to show you because I don't have more done. I'm going to put another seal coat of seal coat to seal this in, and then I'm going to top coat it. You could stop with shellac, just keep going with shellac, but for the top of this table, I want more protection. So the seal coat is waxless shellac, so I can cover that with a varnish, which I'm going to do. I'm going to probably use Waterlock's satin on the top, and but the base I could spray it with a satin lacquer to make it faster, but I want the top with that nice Waterlock's look and the protection of that tung oil varnish. Really looks nice. All right, so once I've got it all on there, I know I've got to do underneath too. I'll do that after. Now I can just get some paper towels or a rag, whatever, and wipe it off. Plenty on there. Can you see that? It's taken on, now it's got this, so it takes a little color of the glaze, but it also warms it up. And are you picking up how it has now like almost an antique quality to it? It looks very different. It's really beautiful, warm, and you can go back over it. I'm just getting the first amount off. Let's see if we can get some of that curl to really, I'll turn it so you can see it. It's pretty sweet, huh? And then the thing about this glaze is you're supposed to top coat it within, I think it's like within 6 hours. I don't know if I'm going to do that tonight. I might just wipe it on again in the morning just to wet it up. I'm not putting on so much. Sometimes you can leave more on if you want to really kind of create the muddy look of antiques on turnings. Like if you put it on turnings, wow, look at this leg. Wow, something about the light right there. It's not as good when I turn it toward you, but a lot of it has to do with the light orientation on these things. All right, that's looking nice. I'm going to flip it upside down for a second. We'll put a little on underneath here. Let me turn it so you can see. So under here, where I missed, and then it's nice, it goes right in that end grain. So see what we've done, because we sealed it with the shellac, what you're doing is you're creating a more complex kind of layered finish. So we put our base tone, our antique yellow, on the wood directly. Then we seal it in. Couple wash coats of shellac. Then we put on our glaze stain. So the glaze isn't really, it's really laying more on the shellac. It is penetrating it subtly, but So what you've got is a little more complexity. So I'm seeing these nice amber tones, these nice golden yellows of the base stain. And then you're getting some of the glaze in the grain itself. So we're using this subtle layering technique. You know, that's what they said Leonardo da Vinci did on the Mona Lisa. Did you know that? What made it so special? He was experimenting with glazing stains like this. Yeah, we're like Leonardo right now. No, actually he was, he put these very microscopically thin layers and they discovered that painting has layer upon layer and they're kind of translucent. So by using that technique, he was able to have great control, but also gave like another dimension of subtlety of color and detail that really blew people's minds. I haven't seen it for myself in person, but what we're doing, we're kind of, in a very primitive way, using that idea. So you're seeing the golden, and then you're getting more absorption in that end grain, but you're creating a more complex, richer, finer finish. And this is the way most finer finishes are done. Like if you're going to use glazes, it's not a one-step. A one-step finish is trying to put the color in the finish and everything, and so it's just all on there in one layer. This is going to be enhanced by, after this, we're going to go with the shellac, which will then really bring up the depth and the fullness of the chatoyance again. And then I'll go with my top coat. So you'll have to check back next week to see this finished, and we can really look into it and see how nicely it came out. But thank you so much for being here. It's really can't happen without you. And it just feels like you spent and visited right here in the shop.